Good morning, Remembrance Community Church. Whether you guys are here in person or online, I want to invite you to open up your Bibles to 1 Timothy chapter 5. 1 Timothy chapter 5. In 2018, this is before the crazy pandemic and all those things, 2018, the magazine Christianity Today put out an article, and it was titled, "The Church is a Family, Not an Event." The church is a family, not an event. And this brings up a good point in the article. If you read it, it's pretty much what you would expect from it, but it's just a great title for an article, and it brings up a great point. That depending on how you view and value the church, that will shape who the church becomes. It will shape who we become as a church. If the church is an event, then we're going to become a bunch of consumers that just come for the event, come to consume the event. Church will be about, can you inspire me? Can you entertain me? Okay, then I'll come, right? That's the value. Or it could become like a social club. If the church is like a social club, then it will become like a social club. You'll gravitate towards people that are like you, that you like, and you'll hang out with them, and it'll be a social club. It'll be a place where you can have people that you can belong, which isn't terrible, but is that what the church is supposed to be? Or sometimes the church can become like a business. The church is like a business. If you run it like a business, it'll start to look like a business. Or a political lobbyist group, right? A church can become a place where we just talk about politics and fighting all the agendas that are coming against us and all the wrong people on the wrong side of the political. Or the church can become a bubble to keep us safe. The church is that place I go to kind of retreat and be safe and to stay away from all the pollution in this world. But in 1 Timothy 5, what we're going to see is that Paul has a vision for the church as a family. The church is a family. And so let's dig in 1 Timothy chapter 5, and we're just going to look at 2 verses today, but there's a lot that we can learn from these 2 verses. And Paul says this, tells Timothy, sent to Ephesus to bring health to this church, to bring formation to this church. He wants this church to look like a family, and he says, Timothy, don't rebuke an older man. Don't rebuke an older man, but exhort him as a father. And he says, younger men as brothers. Younger men as brothers. Older women as mothers. And the younger women as sisters with all purity. And so clearly, this is language of a family, right? Timothy, don't treat older men like fathers. Treat older women like mothers. Treat the guys your age and younger, treat them like brothers. And the girls like sisters with all purity. Like if you're a brother, you look at the women, your sisters differently than you look at women in other contexts. The church should be like a family. And Paul's vision for church is like that. We're a family. And a family is united by a special kind of bond. That's something unique about a family. A family unit is united by a special kind of bond. When I think of family, the type of family I want to be a part of, it's a safe place to grow into the person that you're going to become, right? A family should be a safe place to grow into the person that you're going to become. A family should be a safe harbor to come home to after a hard day or a tough season. A family should be a priority. A family should be a priority for your time, your treasure, and your talents. Don't we know that there's 10 million things that we could possibly do, and we don't have enough time to do it all. But family, you make it a priority, right? When it's Thanksgiving, you know where you're going to show up when you're part of a family. You're going to go to the family Thanksgiving. You don't just go to a Thanksgiving dinner. You go to your family's Thanksgiving dinner. It's how family works. It's a priority. And a family is a place for what the Hebrews, the ancient Hebrews called chesed. Chesed is a Hebrew word. A lot of times in the church, when we think of the word love, biblical love, unconditional love, what word do we use? We use the Greek word agape. It's a great word. It's unconditional love. But the word agape to the Christian was a Greek translation of what they had always known as a people, which was this word chesed. Agape is the best Greek word to apply to this word chesed. So you go back to the roots, and chesed is a rugged type of love. Chesed is the type of love, it's like a rugged commitment. Like if you were a parent and you had a child that was addicted to heroin and all the struggles that go with that type of addiction, and yet you just never give up on them. Why? Because you have chesed for them. It's a rugged, committed, unconditional. Nothing can break it. Nothing can separate the love that God has for us. Why? Because God is a God of chesed. His chesed for us. And families are supposed to be a place for that type of love. How many of you guys know if no one in the world accepts you, if you're getting bullied at school, you should be able to go home and find a radical, unconditional, genuine love. Chesed. And in Paul's world, the first century church, right? First century Judaism and all around the world, in the Greco-Roman world, family was a place for hospitality. Family in the first century, in Paul's mind, when he thought of family, one of the key elements of a family is a place for hospitality. And hospitality means that you have a wide open front door. Hospitality means you're welcoming to strangers and people who are different than you. There's always an open bed for the passerby in the first century world. That's why when you read the Gospels, you see parables, and it'll say something like, this one guy, someone came to his house, a stranger came to his house and asked for bread, and he didn't have any bread. And so frantically, he goes to his neighbor, and he knocks at the door, and he keeps knocking until they wake up. And he says, I need some bread for this stranger. And the analogy is supposed to be about how we pray. And we should pray like that. But he's using the analogy of hospitality. You see, if someone showed up at your door in first century Jewish world, if someone showed up at your door and needed bread and you didn't give them bread, it would bring shame to your family and your whole community. That guy would move on and go, I was in Lomita and I needed bread and they didn't give me any bread. Oh, what shame to Lomita. That's not very hospitable. This is a world where that was just the expectation. There's always a bed open for the passerby. There's always room at the table for any guests. That's why when we read the Gospels, we see this mind-blowing thing that Jesus is sitting there eating dinner with different types of people, right? Sinners and prostitutes. And the Pharisees, they had become ungodly in the sense that they were very exclusive. They didn't want Jesus to eat with those types of people. You shouldn't be eating with those types of people. But the Pharisees were wrong. The Gospels are saying that they weren't hospitable. They weren't biblical because they weren't hospitable. They didn't have, there's room at the table for any guests, right? Like if your kid said, I'm going to bring over this guy, my friend from college, they didn't ask a bunch of questions. Well, is he Jewish? No, it doesn't matter. Just come to the table. There's room. Because hospitality doesn't show partiality. It says that all through the New Testament. James makes a big deal about that. The gospel doesn't show partiality. If you're rich or you're poor, you're welcome at the table. You're welcome at our home. If you're male or female, if you're black or white, if you're Jew or Gentile, if you're politically left or you're politically right, if you're wearing a Field of Burn shirt or a MAGA shirt, you're welcome because we're hospitable. One of the most common critiques of our modern churches, and you probably have heard this before or experienced this, we tend to think like hypocrisy, but that's honestly not the biggest one. The biggest complaint about modern day churches is that they often feel cliquey. They feel cliquey. A cliquey church tends to form exclusive groups that feel as though they're not welcoming to outsiders. It's cliquey. It doesn't feel like I could make my way in. It doesn't feel like I'm welcome there. It doesn't feel like there's a place for me there. It's not hospitable. It's cliquey. It's the opposite of hospitality. And a church should have open, welcoming doors, and a church should be inclusive. It is okay to have friendship groups. That's the tricky part, right? It's okay to have friends that you like spending time with and spending time with them. That's not what a clique is. But when you have a Christian friendship group, when you have a church friendship group, it takes intentionality to maintain hospitality. And that's the part that oftentimes we get lazy about. And that's why we feel cliquey. We get lazy with hospitality. We get comfortable with the known and the comfortable, and we don't want to get out of our comfort zone. We don't want to look beyond our group. We don't want anyone to come into our group and mess up our group. But healthy families are not cliques. And healthy churches are not cliquey. Healthy families are places for hospitality. And so when Paul goes, hey, Timothy, go to Ephesus and plant this church and look at each other like family, all throughout the New Testament in Paul's letters, he talks over and over again in all of his letters about this idea of hospitality. So you know part of that, what he's saying is, hey, make this a place where it's family, where there's hospitality and where there's chesed. And healthy churches are a place of chesed. Families should maintain a rugged commitment to one another. I don't know if you knew this, but if you guys have been around for a while, you remember there used to be a beautiful man who showed up every week, and he was wearing a suit and a hat often. Sometimes it was purple. His name was Jerry. And along this kind of weird time frame where we've all been disconnected, I don't know if you guys knew this. We know this, and we've been engaged, but it's kind of sad news, But Jerry had a stroke, and Jerry's in a convalescent home. And Frank goes and visits him once a week with Jerry's family. I just want to throw this out there as, we don't always have a ton of outreach stuff going on, but if there's anybody who's good at like video and video editing and hospitality, I had this idea that I'd love to present to you guys. I'm not going to do it. Someone needs to step up and do it, and we all need to participate. But what if we just loved on Jerry? He's in a convalescent home. He can't come to us, and legitimately because of COVID, we can't all go and visit him. Frank had to do a lot to get like special visiting rights to go there. We had to fight for that. But what we could do is we could create a video, and Frank could bring it to him and bring an iPad and show him the video. Can you imagine how awesome that would be to Jerry, our brother, who's in a convalescent home? We can't go and visit him, just to send him a video. It says, we're thinking about you, and just a lovely. Anyone come up to me afterwards if that's a gift you have and something you want to do, because that's what family does. We've had a bunch of people that have moved, right? Some of them moved and so fast that we didn't all get a chance. But that's how sometimes family moves. There's a young lady, I call her a young lady because I love her. She's around my age, which, she's young, right? Not as young as I was yesterday, but still young in heart, right? Immaturity. But Julie Toves, JT, she was a part of starting this church, and she did countless things for our church. She got the opportunity to move to Riverside. She bought a house with her daughter, which is awesome. But she's still family. She moved, but she didn't leave our family. We still go visit her. We still keep in contact. That's how family works. That's what I'm saying. There's a vision for family is like chesed. It's what the kids these days are calling ride or die. We're ride or die. Families show up for one another. Families are committed to being family. Joseph Hellerman, Dr. Joseph Hellerman, he's a professor at Biola. He's also a pastor of another EFCA church. We're in EFCA church. There's our brothers in the EFCA in a church in El Segundo. He's one of the elders and teaching pastors. He wrote a book that it really is famous worldwide with pastors and leaders. It was called When the Church Was a Family. And here's what he says. Here's probably the premier quote of the whole book. You don't have to read the book. This is like the book's value all in itself. He goes, long-term interpersonal relationships are the crucible. They're the key point. They're the central point of genuine progress in the Christian life. Long-term interpersonal relationships, committed relationships, sticking with it for a long time, long-term, over time. People who stay also grow. People who leave do not grow. We all know people who are consumed with spiritual wanderlust, right? Just going wherever their emotions take them, their interests take them, their season takes them. But we never get to know them very well because they cannot seem to stay put. They move along from church to church, ever searching for a congregation that will better satisfy their felt needs. Like trees repeatedly transplanted from soil to soil, these spiritual nomads fail to put down roots and seldom experience lasting and fruitful growth in their Christian lives. From a man who's studied this stuff his whole life and teaches this and has watched this and observed this, has discipled and just has a heart for the church's family, he's saying chesed is key. A rugged commitment, a long-term interpersonal relationships. And here's the thing. Families they typically have a strong unity despite vast differences, don't they? I mean, how many of you guys have a family and you have that one uncle or aunt who's really weird, right? Don't point to them if they're here. If you're here and you're pointing at me, I get it, right? That always troubled cousin in and out of jail or whatever it is, right? Always losing his job and asking for money, right? And we don't always relate to our parents or siblings, do we? I remember when I was a teenager, my dad had lost his mind. He didn't know what he was talking about. And then I grew up and I'm like, whoa, I was the one who had lost my mind, right? But we don't always relate to our parents and siblings. They went through different stuff. They had different cultural values. Like it's almost like being a missionary discipling people of different generations, right? Like if you're a boomer, those millennials, like you don't get them at all, right? It's like it's like visiting another country, just having them over for Thanksgiving. We don't all share common interests, right? Family, you don't have to share a common interest to be family. It's not how it works. Our political ideas aren't always the same, right? The sad thing is some of our families are allowing that to become divisive. I'm just not even going to be family with you anymore because of who you voted for or whatever, because of whether or not you go into Trader Joe's and you wear a mask or not. It's like these are unfortunate that it's breaking up the family, but it doesn't have to be. It shouldn't be, right? And then sometimes in the family they intermarry, right, with different people of different cultures. They bring in their family traditions, maybe ethnic, cultural differences, and families get blended. And then we all come from different generations that think so differently. But here's the thing about family. We all show up for Thanksgiving. We all show up for birthdays. We all show up for Christmas. And we do life together. Why? Because we're united, though we're diverse. Because we're family. That's how the church should be. That's Paul's vision for the church. We're family. There's an old saying that goes like this. You can pick your friends and you can pick your nose, but you can't pick your family. And the point is this. The church shouldn't be just you pick who you want to be here. The church is, I choose to be family with you because God brought you here. The church is a family. And what a beautiful example. What a beautiful example. We could sit here and complain about how diverse divisive our world is becoming, right? With cancel culture and the culture of contempt and all the things, right? But think about it like this as a context. What a beautiful example of the gospel it would be if the church was like family. No one else is doing it, but we're doing it. As an example of the chesed of our God, the loving kindness, the unwavering love of our God. What an example it would be if we were marked by hospitality and chesed. The church should be an example of how to be human in this crazy world we live in this crazy time in history that we live in. What an opportunity to be the church, to spread the gospel, to reveal the gospel. In his book, a family, it's a fellowship of differences. Fellowship of differences. The author, his name is Scott McKnight, and he's an expert theologian, Scott McKnight, and he's a theologian that specializes in the first century world, the context of the New Testament. He's a New Testament scholar, and he gives this picture of what it was probably actually like to go to a church in the first century. Like right when the church was starting, he said, you would have went to these churches in like Ephesus, like where he's writing this letter, or Corinth, or even all throughout that first century biblical world. He said, you would have showed up to a church, and what would it have looked like? They didn't have tents like this. They didn't have a building to meet at. They would meet at the house of somebody who had enough money to own a house, right? So there was maybe a more wealthy businessman who had his house. And it was just contextual, like if you're the man of the house, your wife's going to come, your kids are going to come, all the people that work for you are probably going to come. It's just part of the deal, right? They go to your church, which is in your house. A couple neighbors might come, and then that same dynamic, they would bring, their spouse, their family, the people that worked for them, right? And then people that maybe rented rooms from them, right? So you have poor people that are coming who are maybe renting rooms. They might be bakers or tent makers or whatever. Not the people that own the business, but the people that work for the people who own the business. And then you might have some stragglers who just kind of move around, what we would call homeless people. You might have some homeless people that just come to your church, right, and do church with you. And you probably have some Roman centurions or people or Roman soldiers that might have seen your family and they were attracted to that. Well, they were welcome too. You'd have Roman soldiers there. And then you might have some people who had converted from Judaism, right? You have some Jewish people, maybe Pharisees, maybe from all these different political, right? And you would have had children there, and you would have had middle-aged people, and you would have had older people, right? It would have been wildly different. And so now that gives you a context. When you think about that, look at all of the letters that Paul's writing. He's like, I'm teaching you how to get along because you're so different. I want to teach you how to be the church, how to be family in the midst of being so different. And these were the most unlikely groups to form community and be a family. That's what the church looked like. And Jesus built a church family like this. When Jesus picked 12 diverse young men to follow him, didn't he? Now here's one of the more popular examples. Remember Matthew the tax collector? There's Matthew the tax collector. Matthew the tax collector was working for the Roman government. The Roman government had overtaken the Jews and basically held them under tyranny. They took advantage of them. They were their overlords. You could live in your land, but you can't rule yourselves. We rule over you. You pay taxes to us. You follow our rules. And the Jewish people hated this. And Matthew took advantage of this. He got a job with them, taking advantage of his own people, collecting taxes from his own people. It was well known that they exploited he exploited his own people to get rich. So you have Matthew. Jesus picked him. He said, hey, you follow me. And Matthew was even surprised. Like, what? Yeah, you follow me. I know who you are. You follow me. And then he goes out and he picks Simon the Zealot. Simon the Zealot is a part of this group called the Zealots that hated the Roman government. They were the most extreme fighting force against the Roman government. They were called the Daggermen. You ever seen the movie The Daggermen? It's about them, the Zealots. Their dream, their oath, in order to become a zealot, you had to take an oath that if you were ever in the same room as Caesar, you would risk your life and you would kill him. You're a zealot. You hate Rome and anybody who works for Rome. Can you imagine having dinner with those two? Matthew the tax collector and Simon the Zealot? Hey, you come over here and you guys sit next to each other. That's where your nameplates are at. Because that's what Jesus was like. Then you had fishermen, you had, some weird dude named Judas that everyone thought was weird all from the beginning, and then he proved it at the end, right? You have Thomas, the kind of punk rock, he's rebel at one time, and then he's doubting Thomas and the next, You have Peter, who's like, everyone knew he was the leader, and then you had John, who was a little jealous of him and wanted to be the leader. I'm the one Jesus loves. At one point in John's gospel, he's like, oh yeah, this one time, me and Peter were racing, and I won. Yeah, John and James are the sons of thunder. They're like, hey, Jesus, when we get to heaven, can we be your homies, like better than all the other guys? We deserve it, right? Like these guys are not the likely family. And Jesus is like, no, you're going to spend 3 years with me, like it or not, and you're going to become family. And they did. That was Jesus's vision for the church. The church needs to be hospitable, open arms. The church needs to have a rugged commitment to fellowship of the difference. And in our text today, Paul highlights another key aspect of a godly family. And it's this: the importance of honor. Importance of honor. Paul starts, he goes, hey, don't rebuke an older man, but exhort him gently. What is he talking about? Honor. The younger man, honor the older men. And like dads. And the older women, like moms. And your brothers, like brothers. Brotherly love. And your sisters, he goes like sisters in all purity. Honor them. Honor them. In Matthew 15:4, Jesus is talking. He goes, hey, you remember when God said, honor your father and mother? That's from the first 5 books of the Bible, the Torah, specifically the 10 Commandments. Honor your father and your mother. And Paul equates that. Hey, honor the people in your church like they're your father and your mother. It's like it's a 10 Commandment. In Romans 12:10, Paul goes, love one another deeply as brothers and sisters. And then he goes, take the lead in honoring one another. We live in a cancel culture, don't we? Dishonoring. We want to dishonor someone so we can we can cancel them. Right? We live in a culture of contempt. We're angry at everybody, right? What a stark contrast if we would just honor one another. To honor someone is to see them in the most favorable light possible. When he's talking about honor someone, it's to see them in the most favorable light possible. That's not cancel culture, right? We want to look at them as the most dishonorable light possible. That's not a contempt, right? That's not tribalism. We want to form our tribe where our group is really formed based on who we're against and what we're against more than who we're for and what we're for, right? Tribalism is about us versus them. And here the Bible is saying, no, honor past that. Honor everybody. Honor one another. How can we honor one another? We could come up with probably a list of 50 if we went around. We did a thing like, hey, get in groups of 2 or 3 and write down 10 ways you could honor someone today. But some of the biblical ones I was thinking about is we should treat others like we want to be treated. If you're a conservative Republican, how do you want a Democrat to treat you? You want them to cancel you? To misunderstand you? Or do you want them to honor you? Do you want them to love you? Do you want them to listen to you maybe? Well, will you do that with them? Listen to them. Hear their stories. Don't assume you know why someone's the way that you are. I was brokenhearted this week. There's a guy I was working with. He was working overtime at the firehouse. He's a Christian. He's like become disgruntled, and I get it. But he was just talking about, like, he said this. He goes, I went to my church. It's a conservative church. And I told my pastor, we're not going to do homeless ministry. Because those homeless people, and he goes off on this whole thing like he's got homelessness figured out. He gets it. He just knows, right? I literally threw my chair over. I did. I mean, I'm a drama queen. I don't care. I'm like, dude, if you did that to me, I would say go find another church. And then I had to pull them outside away from him. I said, hey, let's talk about that, man. You find that attitude in the Bible and then we'll talk. I'll show you 100 attitudes in the Bible that are corrective of you, right? And we had a good talk about it. But that's the thing. We need to be willing to listen to people, hear their stories. You don't know why people are the way they are. But long-term relationships, we can get to know one another, right? That's a commitment. We could cheer people on. We could cheer people on and give some encouragement. There's no room for jealousy in a family. There shouldn't be. There is sometimes, even in the Bible, but it always causes big problems, jealousy, right? We want to honor ourselves. We want everyone to honor us. But to honor someone is to celebrate with them when they succeed, even when we're going through a hard time and we might feel jealous. We repent of that, and we change our attitude, and we celebrate. We cheer them on. We embrace differences, to be humble and seek to understand where people are coming from, and be quick to forgive. These are just a couple of ways that we can honor people, honor one another. But that's important. If we're going to be a gospel-centered church, then the gospel-centered church is going to be hospitable, and it's going to be filled with chesed, a rugged commitment to love one another, to not hold people's wrongs against them, right? Jesus is like on the cross dying, and what's his response, right? Oh, cancel them. Cancel. No, he's like, forgive them, Father. They don't know what they're doing. Right? I understand that where they're at right now, there's a reason behind it, God, and I'm compassionate for the brokenness in them that's making them do this. That's Hesed. And families should be disciple-making factories. That's God's vision for a family. Your disciple-making factories. And Paul uses this in this couple of lines. He goes, honor one another, and then he says, don't rebuke an older man, but then what does he say that he should do? He says, exhort them. Don't just leave them alone. Exhort them. This is a word that's screaming for disciple making, to exhort one another, to encourage one another, to correct one another gently, to teach one another, to pray for one another. When I took this guy, first, my response wasn't great. I mean, you could say it was godly because Jesus flipped over tables, but I doubt it was as godly as Jesus was. I'll just be honest. It wasn't Jesus-like. I was pissed. But then I flipped it over, and then I was like, thankfully, the Lord kind of just stopped me in my tracks. I took him outside, and then it was exhortation. That was in love. At first, I rebuked. He's an older man. I probably rebuked him in a wrong way first, in front of people, embarrassed him. But then I took him outside and exhorted him. But it's because we love each other. We want each other to do better, right? We want each other to learn, and we want to learn from each other. Families raise up the next generation. We go all the way back to the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible. We look at Deuteronomy 6. This was famously called the Shema. The Shema was something that if you were Jewish, you would grow up reading it in the morning, in the afternoon, and at night. You would memorize it. Not only would you memorize it, you would memorize it and you would recite it. You would remember it over and over and over again. You would meditate on it. And it goes like this. Listen, Israel. Hear, O Israel. That's what the word Shema means, listen. That's why it's called the Shema. Listen, Israel. And the idea is that you would hear this and then put it into practice. That's what it was like biblically to listen. Listen, Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength. That's the foundation. And then from that, these words that I'm giving you today are to be in your heart, but then repeat them to your children. Talk about them when you sit in your house, and when you walk along the road, and when you lie down, and when you get up, and bind them as a sign on your hand, and let them be a symbol on your forehead. Write them on your doorpost of your house and on your city gates. And think about that. God's word. Talk about it all the time. When you wake up, talk about it. When you go to bed, talk about it. During the day, when you're at home hanging out, talk about it. You know, you're watching a TV show and something comes on, talk about it. You know, what do you see? Is that biblical? Isn't it biblical? What do you think about it? Talk about it. When you're in the car on a road trip, talk about it. Talk about the Lord. Because a family should raise up the next generation to do what? To love God. And to love others. To be hospitable. And to show chesed. It's as simple as that. That's the church's mission. To be like that. To be family. And here's the thing. I'm going to have the worship team come back up. If we're going to be a disciple-making factory as a church, a family that's a disciple-making factory, we are going to need to approach disciple-making like missionaries. One of the biggest disconnects that I've seen as a pastor is between the older Christians in our congregation and in the world, the older generation and the younger generation. In Paul's second letter, he exhorts you to do this. He says this. He goes, older men, disciple the younger men. He tells you, older men, you, not like older men that are on the disciple-making team. He just goes, older men, all of you, you need to disciple the younger men. Older women, you need to disciple the younger women. And then he goes, younger men, you need to want to be discipled by the older men. Younger women, you need to want to be discipled by the older women. That's what he says. That's what Paul says in his second letter. This is like the continuation of these two verses. But older men, some of the younger men don't want to be discipled by you. We should be asking why. And I'm going to tell you right now, this is what I think. The number one way for us to overcome it is to start treating discipleship as like missionaries. When you go as a missionary, the number one thing they teach you is they say, don't go to whatever tribe that you're going to and try to make them Americans and then make them Christians. You go figure out what it looks like in their culture, and you figure out how to contextualize the gospel into their culture. Older men, you need to learn how to contextualize a millennial culture and teach them how to follow Jesus. Not the way you did. It's changed. The world's changed. They don't need to become a boomer in order to be, right? They don't need to vote for who you vote for. They don't need your political ideals. They need Jesus. They need to know how to love God, and they need to know how to love one another. They need to know how to love others. That's what they need. And younger men, be compassionate towards the older men. They need help learning how to do that. They need to learn from you too. But if we're going to be a family that looks like a biblical family, we need to be a disciple-making factory. And the older men need to disciple the younger men. And the younger men need to want to be discipled by the older men. And the women, the same thing. It just has to happen. We got to figure it out together. We need to enter into it like missionaries. I don't have all the answers, but here's a little bit of advice. All you need to do, if you want to be a disciple maker, man, is you need to know, legitimately, you need to know 5 things in the Bible that you think are important to teach them. I really believe that. That's what gets the ball started. You know what mine are? 5 or 6. a young man comes to me and wants to learn from me, the first lesson I have for them is that you're saved by grace. There's nothing that you could do to make God love you anymore. There's nothing that you could do to make God love you any less. We read through Ephesians chapter 2 together. You're saved by grace, right? You're saved by grace. The second thing I want to teach them is that worship is what you do because you love God. From the Old Testament to the New Testament, from Romans 12 to the Old Testament book of Micah. It's all about your heart. I don't want your sacrifices, I want your heart. That's what worship looks like. When you love God, when you love others, when you do that practically because you love God, it's worship. It's easy to fall away. That's my third lesson. It's easy to fall away because you have the flesh, right? You have the world and you have the devil. And we'll talk about that. Like, it's easy to fall away. Be careful. The very next thing we talk about is learn how to fall, like a skateboarder. You Christian, you need to learn how to fall. You need to learn that you need to be able, when you will fall down, just get back up and keep going and don't give up, right? You need to learn how to train yourself how to be godly. We talk about that. And then you need to learn how to live your ordinary life with gospel intentionality. Younger people, this is a thing. You know what God's plan for your life is? It's not one big capital, bold, label thing. God doesn't have a plan for your life. Like it's one thing, a plan for your life. Your whole life, God has a plan for it. He has a plan for your life, yes. He doesn't have a plan for your life. He has a plan for your life, right? Today, what's God's plan for your life? I don't know. Maybe pick up your socks like your mom told you to. Throw them in the hamper, right? Maybe it's, show up to work and don't lie and say you're sick. I don't know. Maybe it's God's plan for your life is to be obedient to him every day in the small things and the big things. It's not one thing you got to get right. It's a lot of little things add up to God's plan for your life. And we talk about that. And so, church, we need to be family. That's Paul's 2 verses. Hospitality and hesed and disciple making. We need to be missionaries for each other. We need to listen. We need to honor one another. Now I want to end our time as we enter into a time of worship with what we've been doing. And it's like a unhurried moment of silent prayer is what we're doing. I just want to be clear. My expectation isn't that we're going to sit here for a minute and in that minute, God's going to zap you and I don't know. Maybe he will. I hope he does. But that's not the expectation. That's not why we're doing this. The reason why we do this is to practice something we should be doing with all of our lives, which is to slow down, be unhurried, and sit with Jesus. And Rich Villodas, I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name right, I'm sure I butchered it, but he wrote a great book called The Deeply Formed Life. He says this. He said, our world continues on faster and busier, and we are reminded that our souls were not created for the kind of speed to which we've grown accustomed to. The world's going faster than is healthy for you, he's saying. Thus, we are people who are out of rhythm, a people with too much to do and not enough time to do it. And so I just want to offer us each week as one of our new practices that we'll just sit for a minute or two in silence, paying attention to the fact that God is with us, fighting against anything like, what am I going to eat? What am I going to do next? All the the to-do lists and all the hurriedness and the anxiousness. We just say, God, help us slow that down and just be present with you right now. And we'll just do that for a minute, and then we'll worship together, and then we'll take communion together, and then we'll have a little time of family sharing. We'll have some family time, and then we'll go about our business, hopefully better than when we came. That's the goal. Amen?